to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
Welcome back. I'm Steve. I'm a licensed professional therapist here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. With me is Julia, the co-host and a therapeutic coach. Together we talk about a variety of different subjects, or sometimes we interview other people to provide you with a different perspective about life and to help you to be a better you. To contact us, it's 918-280-08690 or CoachSoul.com. These are two ways to contact us, not on an emergency basis, but to provide feedback, questions for upcoming shows. And if you'd like to be on the show, please use the contact page on the website. We would love to hear from you. Julia, as always, it's good to see you. But there's one thing I think we need to address. We've been talking about community. We're talking about a sense of our thoughts and suicide and how people do this. And one thing I think about is when people think about suicide, do they have a fear of death?
Okay.
Because I've been in that situation, military. When you go into combat, you have that fear of getting shot at. You're a police officer. Didn't you have a fear of getting shot at?
Well, I think, Steve, I love this topic because I think there's a couple of different ways we can address this. I think that it is inherent in us to have a sense of fear of how we're going to die. But is that the same thing as having a fear of death? And so having had experience working with hospice and death and just holding hands of loved ones as they've passed over and in the chaplaincy programs and stuff that I've been involved in, I can say it also depends on when we're looking at that death ticket come a-calling, because in our younger years, we think we're invincible. In our mid years, we're thinking, there's things that we still want to accomplish, but there becomes a certain point at the end of our life cycle where we begin to kind of look forward to the release and of everything that we've held on to. We want to make sure that we've had those deep friendships and connections. We want to make sure our things are in order. We'd prefer to be going out in good, decent health, okay? But there becomes a big space there where you begin to plan for the inevitable. And so I think that question of, do we fear death, or do we fear the process, or is it a fear of unpreparedness?
Even in my thought process right now, it's like, okay, Steve, do I have a fear of Julia right now? Plethora of information, just the way you come. We can have a fear of knowledge.
Yes.
And what I'm thinking about fear is connectivity, because we talked about community. We talked about these other things that leads up to these things. But now we have COVID that hit that did not help at all with our social anxiety. Mm-hmm. And we wear these masks and we can't see facial cues, and it just throws us off. Now imagine how an autistic person feels. A mask is like an autistic person. They can't read facial cues, and it makes it difficult for them to be able to communicate. And now when you get a sense of community and we're asking people to connect, that's fear. I'm afraid of what you're going to say. I'm afraid of what you're going to do. I'm afraid of the reaction. I'm afraid of a rejection and abandonment. I mean, all these come into play into people's persona. What have you come across in your therapeutic coaching?
Well, I think that there's, I want to also, before I answer that question, as to what I've come across, that was a big old chunk right there for me. I'm like, I want to answer all of these.
Made you afraid now.
Is that it is normal to fear what we don't know or don't understand. True. Unless we develop a modality or a course of viewing that thing we don't know or understand as a curiosity. because in the nervous system, fear and curiosity can be equal. It's just that how our brain interprets which one we're actually doing is the same thing as being tired or being hungry. And so we learn through a process, depending on how we were raised and teach and the influences that are in our lives, to choose one option or the other as far as interpretation goes. So again, that's a big chunk that we can break apart and talk about in smaller pieces. But typically speaking, when I see fear showing up with my clients, it is fear of not being appreciated or accepted. It's a fear of belonging. Where's that space? I deal with a lot of younger clients. And so sometimes they come to me and they're afraid of being rejected by their parents if they choose to live a life that is more authentic to them. Okay. Versus what they've been taught. A fear of being successful. These are all, the kinds of things that we address in the therapeutic coaching process. And I honestly think that all of our fears, and this is just again from the book of Julia, okay, that book eventually is going to become really famous, okay. I think it's all summed up in I guess I want to wrap it up in a box and say that all of our fears boil down to one thing. I think it's a fear of simply not belonging or feeling like we're going to be judged if we stand in our authenticity. Because otherwise, because if you don't know, you can go learn. If you want to communicate and be in a community, you can go and experience and invite. If we're trying a new experience out, like jumping, I have no desire to jump out of an airplane, but let's just say I want to go skydiving. I can hire people that are experts in that can teach me how to do that and survive by the time I hit to the ground, So really, what is it about? And I think it all boils down to that one little area inside that says, I don't know if I'm capable of doing this. And even if I branch out and be brave and do it, will people accept me just in this space? And so it makes it scary.
I have to agree, because as you're talking here, my mind is going like a hamster wheel all over the place. And I just happen to think about fear, that we don't create a safe space within ourselves. Mm-hmm. And really digest fear and what that is. I mean, you look in, as a faith-based person, I look back in the book of Genesis, it all starts with doubt. The serpent was talking to Eve about, hey, what did God really say? So it creates this doubt. When we have doubt, it creates fear. As a baby, it has fears of falling because it's so small and everything is so big. But as we grow and get experiences, we either have fear or don't. Now, I respect water. I have a fear of water only because I went on a canoeing trip out in Illinois River. I asked this person, don't move. I'm in the back, they're up front, this current's coming around, and I knew what was going to happen. I said, just don't move. The current's going to take us. Let me steer, and I'll be okay. Nope. They moved. We capsized. I'm going under the water, and I get trapped by an underwater tree. I'm trying to figure which way is up because I'm thrown underneath the water. I took a good deep breath as I went under. But fear was starting to set in because I'm going to drown because my leg is caught in this tree. I had to self-talk myself out of how to calmly remove my leg out of the tree, then come up for air and then figure out everything out.
Yes.
So that causes fear. If I can't see what's in the water, I'm not going in. I don't mind fishing, even though I can't see what's in it. Now I'll go in the swimming pool. No big deal. I can see the bottom. But it's that mind fear. I think some fear is healthy because it's a respectful fear of what it could do. I mean, I'm not afraid to cross the street. I'm just afraid of the other driver, the way Oklahomans drive, if I'm going to be hit by a bus. What do you think about fear, that we don't create a safe space within ourselves to address fear?
Well, I think that one, I think that you're onto something there, because it's almost like you have to self-train. To when I was in law enforcement, they would have us make up and replay various scenarios, so that if we should come, basically you're training the nervous system and the brain to deal with a crisis situation, okay, prior to it having gone through it. And so you're just reliving this possibility and all the options that might be available prior to that incident. It may not ever show up, okay, but I think that when we look at potentially creating a space to address the things that we're afraid of, or create a safety space to have that dialogue internally with ourselves, that's a healthy thing to do. Two, I think you find that you're probably not as afraid of certain things that you thought you were. It's just the mind went off into its ruminations,
Right.
and created a bigger monster out of it than what it actually is. When we play with the idea of fear, we also discovered that there's other words or terms that can be associated with it, that fear is not the only descriptive, if you will, for what we're feeling. And so if we can create that safe space in us where we can have that internal dialogue, we can dissect the many, many emotions that may be attached and being summed up in that word fear.
So what you're trying to say is, like, fear is like the word love.
Mm-hmm.
I love ice cream. Well, I love me. I love Julie. I love airplanes. Yes. Whatever, that love.
Very generalized.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we need to be more specific. And I like the Greek language, because love comes with phileo, agape, all kinds of different ways to describe love. And here in English, we lump it all in one sum, and it doesn't help. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I think that looking at the word fear, if you think about it, is it terror? Is it apprehension? Is it just a sense of insecurity? There's probably about 30 words that could describe some version of what we sum up in the word fear, that when it's broken down, and I don't really know if it's 30 or not. I have to go look at the emotional will again. But the fact is that there's other words to use that actually maybe hold a less of an emotional reaction within our system than that of fear.
We talk to our audience here on how to be a better you by describing these things. I want to turn this a little bit for a moment and twist this back to you and I.
Okay.
How can you and I and those in the mental health community help our clients better to express what they're feeling by the word fear, by what you just described?
Well, I think one tool that I give this to my clients on a regular basis is setting down to journal or write out, first of all, the topic. So I have you typically write down at the top of a page, for instance, I'm afraid of, or fear concerns me here, whatever that introductory statement is going to be. And then I have them go through the list of other potential emotions using the emotional wheel. There's several versions of that out there on the internet. It's not a hard thing to locate, to see if they can dissect really and hone in on what they're actually feeling. And then I ask them, somewhere on that paper, usually the other half, it depends on how I have them divided up, the pros and the cons. In other words, what are the benefits of feeling this way? Whatever emotion they're going to, okay. And what are the drawbacks? Because it's not really a positive, negative. It's just, if we are feeling a certain way, what is it that's causing us to be drawn towards that thing? And if they can get down to that, and really, really develop that process, then they can own it. It becomes a certain, there's a feeling of accomplishment of stating, oh, I can feel safe feeling this feeling. I might not feel safe feeling this one, but I can feel safe here. And that means I can begin to mold it, shape it, change it. But over here, I was frozen. And so that's just one of the modalities that I use. What about you?
Similar. I use pictures, like don't think about a polar bear. Well, what did you just do? It's not about a polar bear, right? Yes. So I try to use word illustrations to help to flush out what they're thinking. When they're in your office, there's not much writing you can do. So I try to get them to word associate something that helps them to draw a contrast. I do agree with writing, but here's what I would say with word of caution with people who have trauma. Be careful how you write. If it gets to a point that you're writing out your feelings and thoughts and it's causing a lot of emotions, start writing in third person. This way, you're not reliving anything. You're writing out in a third person, kind of disassociating yourself for a little bit on paper. But I had a client to start, I asked him to write a letter to his mother. His mother's deceased. And I said, write a letter to your mother. And he said that was the most difficult thing to do. He wasn't ready to read it because I do what's called the empty chair technique. Have him read the letter and I engage with that empty chair with him. It has worked in the past with a 16-year-old that I had at an inpatient hospital. We did it. We went outside and she read the letter. I interacted. I took a lighter and burnt the letter. And I said, now as your letter floats away as ash to the sky, your father received that.
Oh, so beautiful.
And it's so impactful. But we have to work and address with our fear. And we have about 7 minutes left to kind of address fear. What about fear of relationships?
Well, quite honestly, I think that, again, it's a very natural emotion to have because you're dealing with the unknown. And there is an element, if it's a healthy relationship, there's going to be some concern there anyway, because guess what? You recognize that you can't control the other person and they can't control you. And so I think that there is the idea that, oh, I don't know what this is going to be. So there's perhaps some hesitation or feelings there on that. But I also think that if it's a long-standing fear, in other words, a lot of uncertainty is there. The uncertainty, if you've had what I consider a healthy childhood, you may go, oh, I'm willing to have patience with this and let this develop. If you've had a traumatized childhood, uncertainty can be detrimental. So again, where are we standing with our clients or within ourselves? And how long is this fear? How was it defined? What are the circumstances that is bringing it up? And two, how long has it been existing? And so those are some of the questions that we would have to ask and address with our clients. I have to deal with it on a regular basis because my childhood was a traumatized childhood. And so when I find myself getting in the uncertainties, I have to become very, very aware that where is that coming from? Is that internal, the little girls inside me going, ooh, I need to feel safe. I want to know that I'm taken care of and provided for. Or is that the adult 51-year-old Julia that's standing back going, you know what, we got this. And we have a proven track record that we're safe. So where is this feeling coming from?
You know, a lot of it is we get caught up in our own mind.
Yes, we do.
Of what we expect of how this is going to happen.
Bingo.
We expect something to happen. And it's almost like you're sitting in a movie theater. Here comes Jason, and you're hiding in the closet. And I'm like, just get out. But you're
not going to be any safer in that closet than you are if you're running.
Right. But that kind of shows our fight and flight and our freeze moment.
Freeze in our face. Yeah.
And it's easy for us to sit in this chair and tell, how stupid are you hiding in that closet? Get out. But until you're in that moment, oh my gosh, it changes the dynamics of everything.
Yes, it does.
And we have to remember to give some allowance to the other person that we're dealing with. Not only do we have to create a safe space within our own self, we have to create a safe space for one another.
Yes.
So that fear can be addressed, that fear can have some relief and not control us. What do you think, Julia? We got about 4 minutes left.
Well, I think that you're onto something there. I certainly can't disagree, but I would change the wording. Instead of us using the wordings of we have to do something, I would use the words that we invite ourselves to make allowances of safety for ourselves and those that we're in relationships with. There is one is forced and the other one is a gentling. And so I would use some caution there with how we word what we're talking about. For individuals that are going through this, the invitation would be, my invitation to them, and your invitation, I'm sure, would be the same, is that how can we help promote safety within each other, in our dynamics, or in our relationships, our co-workers, even, just everyday life.
But what we just did here, Julia, we modeled something for our audience. You use constructive criticism to say, hey, think about something else here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It didn't bother me. Not because I'm a therapist. Please remove that out. I'm Steve. I'm a human being, right? And you're right. We need to invite, but we need to have this dialogue that we just had, that I'm not intimidated by you or you're intimidated by me. But we can have a level of conversation that if we address fear, look what kind of conversation that you and I can have right now.
Yes. Yes.
It's inviting, and we created a safe space between you and I.
Absolutely.
But audience, here's the thing. We may be professionals. We're still human beings.
Amen.
I feel like a Kumbaya song coming on here. Right? But we have to create. See, there I go again. We have to. We need to invite the idea to create a safe space so that we can have good dialogues like this, even though we might differentiate or have difference of opinions somewhere. That if we create the safe space, we create something better out of where we've been. And we have to see, there we go again. See, you got me.
You're catching yourself.
I am conscientious right now. We should be able to create a safe space where we're not fearing one another's thoughts. To be able to create a better environment that creates a sense of healthiness and not worried about how many times am I saying you have to,
or you should,
right?
But I think again, it's all about small minor changes. And I know our time is coming up, at least as far as this podcast, so we might want to carry this into the next one. But that we are creating an open, safe dialogue, and without judgment or persecution or even fear. It's simply a space of honoring where each of us are at in this conversation. and there's a camaraderie, a sense that we've come together for similar or even some of the same reasons to share what we know with our audience. But it's also a self-growth process. I love the invite to our audience to remember we're human. We're going to mess things up. We're going to trip and we're going to fall on our face, and we're going to have to dust off our jeans. I mean, the whole 9 yards. But here we are being incredibly vulnerable and open about what we think, what we feel, how we're sharing and engaging, and all in the hopes that we reach someone that needed to hear it in the moment that they're hearing it. But even if it didn't reach a single person, there's this beautiful, beautiful growth process that we are sharing by doing this podcast.
So this is our cliffhanger. We're going to pick up part 2 of Fear. Stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe and be kind.